Garrick, how
Hey,
you doing, buddy?
good. I'm doing good. How are you doing?
Really,
Wow.
award-winning, award-winning banter.
That's
on the
good.
Rabbit Trails podcast.
Sorry, I'm getting splinters. You guys are so wooden. What's happening to this?
I know.
That is
So-
the pleasant voice of Paul Duncan. Everybody.
Yeah, we have an amazing guest. There's a lot we can introduce, Paul. I mean, Spanish speaker,
among other languages.
among others. Well, someone he loves Spain. I'll say that. I've known Paul for a long time through Spain, and he's a guy who loves Spain and loves the people of Spain. So there's that for Paul.
Phenomenal.
Yeah, but not exactly. See, I said he was a Spanish speaker, connoisseur of fine whiskeys, and then kind of a leadership guru, I would say. Right? Would you say that, Barrett?
I would definitely agree. So when I was national leader of Sweden, Paul was, or actually through the years, Paul and I have had many, let's say, sessions where Paul would throw out the cheeky question that unlocked one particular insight or another. I think secretly Paul always holds back a little bit, thinking, "You idiot." Somewhere in his head, he's probably thinking that about me, but that probably speaks more to my insecurities than Paul.
Well, I think that's all English people dealing with
that's
Americans.
True. That's true.
In the back of their head, they're all like, "Yeah, you guys."
The accent makes them so smart.
It is, we realize we are superior. So you were right, yeah.
Yeah. So Paul Duncan, welcome to the podcast. Paul, what is your current title within Agape Europe?
Okay, so I am a regional country coach. So I'm on the region VP team. So I'm the country coach for Spain, Portugal, France, Ukraine, North Macedonia, and Serbia.
Yeah.
Okay, and so that means at halftime every year you make changes, you pull people, you know that's what the coaching is, or
it's much more powerful than that. Yeah. We're trying to change the world one conversation at a time.
Well, in my years of experience, actually, I said and jokingly, but in my years of experience with Paul, you really do have a way of coaching. You've obviously studied it. It is your degree, is it not?
Yeah, I have a master's in coaching and mentoring from Oxford Brookes, and my dissertation was on how do the beliefs of Christian coaches impact their coaching practice. And there isn't a lot academically written, but my thing is there, and I've now been cited 7 times.
Oh, wow.
So that months of work, 7 people have looked at it. So
wow. And now
plus the marker. So
do you
there must
get
be 9
royalties for
people.
that?
Do I get no?
No, that's unfortunate.
No, not for being cited.
I'm not looking. I realize my academic prowess is not what I thought it was going to be.
Well,
I leave it to the people.
But your impact is great. So, okay, so Paul, we're excited to have you on.
Yes.
You, in addition to thinking about coaching, you obviously are the coach of leaders within Europe, but you also know a fair bit about leadership, having been a leader yourself, having been in various leadership positions over the many years. And we've been
saying I'm old. Is that what you're saying?
Nope.
You just said many years.
Well,
why need to mention many?
Well, I've been learning Spanish for many years. It feels like so that is a relative term.
Okay.
Yeah. So okay. So we have been doing a little bit of a jaunt on leadership, and so excited to have you on to talk about leadership and in the quote unquote green room, as I've heard other people on podcasts say, which is just another word for saying before I hit record. You were talking about, we had started to talk about a little bit about, okay, is it skill or is it character? And you started to quote something that was gold. And I don't want to miss it. So lead us back down that trail. Is it character or is it skill? And what is at the core of the essence of leadership in your mind?
Yeah. So, so obviously it is a straw man, a straw leader. If I was to polarize, I would say Christians tend to value or prioritize character and integrity. And so when that happens especially because it's a spiritual thing, they're called by God, people tend to work harder and harder and harder because they haven't got the skills. And so ultimately they end up being burnt out because there's only so hard you can work. So the danger is that they burn themselves out. The other danger, and it's less true in Christian organizations, is you have people who are highly skilled but have no integrity at all, or very little integrity. And that then often leads to pride. And we know pride never ends well for the individual or for the organization. So actually I think that's worse.
Yeah.
And so because I have two scriptures which I guess influence my thinking. First one, Psalm 78, verse 72, talking about David, how he shepherded Israel with integrity or an upright heart, depending on the translation, and with skillful hands. So the Christian leader needs both. We need integrity of heart, an upright heart, but we also need, you can't neglect skills. A shepherd who's got no skills is not going to be a very good shepherd. So there are some practical things which will make things go easier. And the other one, which I was talking about this on the leadership team earlier this week, is found in Acts 4, verse 13. And I believe you have that verse open. This is Peter and John before the Sanhedrin. And read the verse.
Yeah, I'm reading from the official version of Heaven, the New American Standard
That's
version.
okay.
I'm just kidding. It happens to be that because that's what was up on my phone. Okay. Now as they observed the confidence of Peter and John and understood that they were educated and untrained men, they were amazed and began to recognize them as having been with Jesus.
So I believe it does say uneducated rather than educated.
Sorry, uneducated.
Yeah, it's always good if you try not to misquote scripture. It's a bit dangerous, that. Okay, so it's really interesting. For me, I was thinking about, well, what do we value with leaders? Do we value education? Do we value schooling? Do we value charisma? And the danger is we value all these things. But the thing that marked those guys out to these great spiritual leaders and authority is they'd been with Jesus. And I was wondering about myself, what's my legacy? What do people say about me? Are they able to see my life as being transformed because I've been with Jesus? And I think we always want to make sure this is the main thing. It's about spiritual leadership. That's what we're about. Blackaby talks about getting people onto God's agenda. I'm thinking more about these days. What does it mean? How do people know I've been with Jesus? And it's simple yet complicated.
Mm-hmm. Paul, one of the things. So we mentioned this earlier too. As I've been kind of on a leadership journey, more or less, but looking at what's available or how we train leaders in even our own organization, which I'm not saying is negative or bad, or in a lot of parachurch organizations, and looking at those, But one thing I remember, it's just very clear, and it's on my phone, is an image that you use. We asked you to come and speak to Spanish leaders maybe a few years ago now already, but you had these two images. You said which one?
Oh, the guys climbing what was an army leader and helping somebody up, or what at the bottom with the guy trampling on his head.
Yeah, and I think the assumption was, as you look at it, your assumptions are that a good leader is the one who's up and pulling somebody up, right?
Yeah.
Whereas the reality was and the other one was the leader was stepping on the guy, but the reality was no. The best leader is the leader who's underneath the guy, his subordinate, and pushing him up, and he's being used as a ladder. So he's, there's service, there's empowering, and so I think that's where you're seeing more in what I would say that style of leadership, or that push, that maybe that training, and maybe this is a question of skills here. So I'm getting to a question here, but so you have that image, and that seems to become more and more the operative imagery in the image in the military, even in business, in management, that you as a leader are there to empower and to be, for lack of a better term, not the upfront guy holding the banner going, follow me, but the guy pushing people forward. But that requires a change of heart, change of perspective, but also it requires skills. Yeah. So when you say skills, are you talking about those like soft skills as well? Because I think a lot of times when I see how crew trains people, we train people on how to do evangelism, how to do discipleship, how to do certain things which are great and important. But do we teach the soft skills in the church, in whatever organization that people really need? So I don't know. And what do you think about all that? What I just said?
So I've been on staff since 1985. So what's that? 37 years. Mm-hmm. So we've that's almost as old as Barrett is.
It's like in prime ministers of England. That's like what, 37 by now? You guys have been just chewing up.
Obviously, my nationality gives me a great place to be able to stand and speak on leadership. So I think we've changed. I would say when we started, we were quite Darwinian in our leadership development. The survival of the fittest. So we chucked you in the pool. And if you could swim, great, you made it. And if you didn't, well, oh dear, never mind. You weren't meant to be. You weren't meant to be certainly a team leader. So I think context is quite important. So ultimately, people are designed to grow. It's just whether or not the organization helps that or makes it more difficult. Mm-hmm. And so I'd say in our history, we've done a bit of both. So when I was responsible for leadership development in Western Europe, I saw lots of really hardworking people who were lacking just some simple skills. So, I created CXI, just focusing on some of the skills that would help planning, how to lead yourself, how to grow your team, how to create that environment, stuff on planning, and then conflict resolution, because ultimately working with independent people is incredibly difficult. And if you don't train people, either they copy what they did from their team leader because he did it really well or she did it really well, or they do the opposite because it was really bad. But we have some great conflicts. Family Life have some great stuff on conflict resolution and how you have conversations. We've now got behind, Crucial Conversations by Granny. So I think as an organization, we've become more aware that actually these soft skills trip people up. So I think generationally we've moved on. I had an experience a number of years ago where someone said to me, coaching was psychobabble. Which was kind of a surprise. But now there's a strong coaching culture in the region. So there are individuals in any organization who are old school and hold on to what they think is right. And maybe it worked back in the 1960s, but today is just, well, we're on the same planet just about, but so much is different. And one of the things that marks out, I think all the books talk about this, is, leaders are curious. But they're not just curious, they're learners as well. They don't, it's like Moses saw the bush was burning. Okay, that's curiosity, but then he stepped towards it. So you've got to do something about your curiosity, and for me, that's the learning part of it. So I look for people who are curious, who want to learn, and then with gentlemen like you, I want to ask you questions to stimulate your thinking even more. Why do you think that? What challenging your paradigm? And I think I've noticed of late, that's the thing that I'm doing more and more, is life is being portrayed as you're conservative or liberal. You're this or that. You believe this, if you believe that, you can't believe that. And I'm trying to encourage people, you need to reject that paradigm. You need to say, I'm not going in that trap. There is something different. There's another way in which you can look at things. And I think leadership of the future will be wise enough to avoid the traps that people try to put Jesus in. Whose coin is this? Well, whose face is it? Should we give taxes? Jesus was brilliant in his answer, but it was not the answer people expected. So I think there are leadership traps today where people are trying to put you in a box or on a pedestal, and either way, they're going to push you off it anyway. And we need people who are wise enough to navigate the path that's going to move us forward on the mission, because we're leading for a reason. We're trying to expand God's kingdom. So, this is water, by the way, not gin, just in case you were wondering.
Yeah, it's in the morning, so we assumed it was water. Maybe we shouldn't. Okay, so here's another question, because I feel like I'm always trying to unpack leadership and get to a definition or some kind of ability to. So, but what I hear you're saying, there's a lot to leadership. Obviously, it's complex, but then there is this part which seems very key, and maybe we don't talk about it enough, but it is the life of the mind of a leader, which it seems like yours very tied into that, right? How does that play out? Because I'm not sure all leaders realize they have to be thinking about things, and they have to be, as you said, curious, and maybe the trick, that's not a trick, but maybe the part of the trick is not just doing and going, but it is how we're thinking about ourselves.
So I've taught, so one of my standard questions to leaders is, how much time do you spend thinking? And I get all sorts of answers. Generally, they I'm always thinking, and it's okay. Well, that's great.
What are you thinking about?
Yes, but most people are not taking that time away. It's in their schedule or diary, depending on your culture, where I have think time, and that's concentrated time where all you're going to do is think, maybe read, because I say leaders are paid to think. That is your part of your job. So if you're not doing it, who's doing it for your team, your ministry? So I don't think that thinking is an optional extra. It's something you can do rather than watch Netflix. I'm saying thinking is part of your day job. Ken Cochran used to be a global VP, had one afternoon a week called Issachar time. So it's this idea of being a son of Issachar. And he would, during that time, he would, people would send him stuff or interesting articles to read. And so he would put all those things in a little folder, like I have on my laptop, called the Issachar time. And so when I have Issachar time, I open it and have a look and read and think, oh, that's really useful. So I had a conversation yesterday with someone who wanted to get their head around the difference between coaching and mentoring and spiritual directing and discipleship. And she talked about this book. Here we go. Wayne Cordero, The Divine Mentor. So I've just started reading that, and it's really interesting. This idea of actually there's a bunch of characters in the Bible who can mentor us. So I quite like his style. So I'll read a bit more of it and then decide, is this a book that I need to be saying to the people I'm involved with? I think you'll find this book really helpful to you now. So for me, when I read and think, I'm thinking about, who do I pass this on? Does Nacho need to know this? Does Noella need to know this? Is this helpful for Sasha? So I send it to them, and then I find out whether or not it was right or wrong. I don't know whether that was the answer to your question. It certainly was a rabbit trail.
Why from your perspective or from your experience, why is it that leaders have such a hard time setting aside time to think? If it's so essential.
Yeah. Well, okay, let me flip it, because I know I like doing that to you. Would you say, in your experience of being led, that was modeled to you?
It depends on what level of leadership we're talking about. So I have been very fortunate in that I had contact with several really great leaders in my life who set aside time to think. So various, but then at the same time, I can look all over the place and see. So there's two ways of modeling. There would be the people I came in contact with over long periods of time, or maybe three ways of modeling. There were the leaders who were in my life who weren't necessarily speaking directly into my life, but I observed them. And then what I would say, there is the ethos of an organization, which speaks to modeling. And ethos of organizationally is a little bit of a mixed bag, but oftentimes being an activist organization like we are, there can often, the ethos that can come through can be get going. And we prize the people who, I think the pandemic was a good example of this. We like to promote, and I don't mean like move them to higher office, but more like, oh, look at this person, they're doing really great. In the beginning of the pandemic, it was all about the activators and pivoters were those who were, for lack of a better term, being the loudest, but also those being promoted, versus those who were saying, I think we got to think about this for a while. I don't know. And those were the people who were not poo-pooed, but definitely not highlighted, let's say.
That's quite a technical term, poo-pooed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you have a reputation of a thinker. So I would say that's why you think is you've seen it modeled. So nothing is black and white apart from zebras, obviously. It's country by country. Ultimately, we are an activist organization because mission is at our heart, and people who want to join a crazy organization like us are activists. And so we like being busy. But the challenge is the world and our environment is changing so quickly that activity is not going to produce the results. And so, there's all sorts of idioms about you need to get off the dance floor and get on the balcony and have a look at what's happening. So from the adaptive leadership writing of Heifetz.
Canoeing the mountains also.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, I know you had him on your podcast. It was
can we just as a small aside to that? Okay. Yeah. I was reading some of the source literature for the canoeing of the mountains, Undaunted Courage to my kids, which is a great book by Stephen Ambrose, the author of the books Band of Brothers, which got made into a series. Okay.
Indeed,
great author.
Great
author. I had read that years ago, but somehow I don't think I made it to the final chapter, because why don't we talk about the fact that Clark committed suicide? Like, what? Like, anyway, it blew my mind. I don't know what to do with it yet. It's very raw, obviously, for me. Change leadership up on the balcony. Sorry, I just needed to put that out somewhere. I needed it to be known. He committed suicide. He went crazy. But I think in part he had a mental issue that they think he had from the very beginning. But two,
but what happened to him? He'd lost his task. Yeah,
he did. He lost his task, and that was very hard for him. Yeah.
And because I didn't know that, but I know Lewis tried to help him.
Yeah.
But I mean, after you've done something so momentous, what do you do next? So probably if the president had given him another crazy task, because some people don't fit well in the ordinary, in the boxed, in the known. So he was great. He and some of the things they did, from my reading of Canoeing the Mountains, it was pioneering. Well, pioneers get bored when cities get built. They need to leave. They need to get out to the wilderness and find something new to explore. So, going back to your modeling, there was a great survey done on penalties in, I think it was the Euros or the World Cups. I haven't got the piece of paper behind me. On statistically, if goalkeepers did not move, stayed in the center, they would save, I think it's 12% more penalties. Obviously, until people realized that they weren't moving. But they don't follow the statistics. They dive to the left or their right. Why do you think they dive?
They don't want to look like they got shredded.
Yeah. Because it looks better to have done something, even if it was the wrong thing, than to have done nothing if it was the right thing.
Yeah.
So that's us. We want to look like we've done something, even if it was the wrong thing. And so this idea of thinking, reflecting, it slows us down. I think so. In my schedule, I've put like a 15 minutes at the end of every day reflection. So I don't do it every day, but I have it in my calendar as a reminder. Actually, that would be really helpful to me if I practice reflection more. What went well today? Where did I feel alive? Where did I sense God at work? What do I need to do differently? We talk about sharpening the axe. Well, I'm the axe. So do I want to work harder, or do I want to work smarter? Do I want to see patterns and themes in my life and in my work, or am I quite happy just chopping along because I'm happy with the results? They're very good at sermons. That's quite sure.
Yeah. Well, okay. So quick note: Meriwether Lewis committed suicide. Clark tried to save him. Just
there we go.
Sure on that, because I was like, wait, I think I used the wrong name. So please don't send us emails. Okay. So when I think it's a great point that we kind of keep carrying on thinking. I think thinking's painful. I think it's hard. It doesn't feel, like you said, it doesn't feel like we're doing something. That's a great analogy of the goalkeeper who also is fearing the judgment of others, right? So it's not just, well, I got to do something, so I'll jump, but it's also, you're not going to stay in that position long if you go, well, 12%, I'm going to save 12% more,
But I don't know whether that's true, as in the sense of fear of judgment. I think it's the fear of what might happen. I don't know. I don't know how many people have been judged negatively for taking considered action. There was a famous. You have conversations with people, and they say one thing, and it sticks with you forever. So I was in Portugal in the late 80s on a project with Steve Posey. He was the national director of Portugal at the time. And he was talking about how his experience of the Portuguese people were pushing him to make instant decisions. So they come with a problem and say, I want a decision now. And, he felt like under pressure. And he said he came up with a simple strategy, which I've given to everybody else because it was a brilliant strategy. And Steve said, if you want an answer now, instantaneously, the answer is no. But if you're prepared to give me some time to think and pray, I'll get back to you. And he said, 95% of the time, people said, oh, that's okay. I'll give you some time. So sometimes the urgency it's not actually that urgent.
Yeah. And this goes back to something, we've talked about, or Barrett and I are very high on, this leadership quality of being a non-anxious presence, right? That a lot of time, once again, we're going back to the mind of a leader and how a leader has to process what is going on. So they need time to think, but they also need the ability to step back and when everyone is anxious or wants something done or needs something done, to be able to go, wait, we need to pull back. We need to slow it down. I mean, there's obviously times to make quick, decisive decisions, right? But hopefully you've been prepared for that. But that shouldn't probably be the operating principle of most ministry leadership, Yeah,
but most ministry leaders do not face instantaneous decisions.
Yeah.
So I'd say, Sasha, the national team leader in Ukraine, he faces some instant decisions.
Exactly.
But not many other people.
Yeah. I think mine was when we saw this wave of COVID thing spreading over Spain, realizing we need to cancel certain things right now. Those are the things, and I don't have time to talk anything about that. This is something we have to do because it seems the world we were at the front end of a lot of COVID in Europe, so we had to make some quick decisions.
And sometimes, being quick is seen as better. We've moved from dial-up to broadband, so there are some times when quick is better. I always wonder when Jesus's brothers and sisters said, "Oh, come on, let's get to the let's go to the feast," and he said, "No, he waited." Or when Lazarus, he waited until he was dead.
Mm-hmm.
So it's about time. It's the difference between chronos and kairos. So it's recognizing those kairos moments. And I think one of the good things, just you talking about the mindset. So as an organization, we are using, we've changed the structure, but changing the structure is not going to change the world. We need to be changing the mindsets and the behaviors of ourselves. That's what will make the difference. So I think, we've embarked on the immunity to change mapping process and helping people make those changes to look at the big assumptions that they have and how they maybe are not true or not completely true or are only true in certain circumstances, and how that is enabling mindset and behavior change. That's a great initiative that the organization is doing, and Crew has invested money and time into doing that, and I know Garrett's gone through it.
Yep. I'm now immune to change. No, that's not. That is not the
Wow, dear,
that is
there we
not the
go.
purpose of the training. It is.
Let's just say goodbye. That was Garrick's career going down. There we go. This was Garrick's last podcast.
No, there's much worse on this podcast. It's been said, and so far we still both have our careers.
Wow,
which
Well,
is
let's have
either
good
a
support
good, as it must be a good sign of I don't know how people think about us, or the fact that maybe no one's listening.
Yes.
Sorry to waste your time. I'm just kidding.
So I think there's as I'm thinking, we're talking about in a lot of ways personal change, but also cultural change, right? And so you're someone who's helping to lead cultural change, and I think there's a lot of I remember being in seminary, and that the professors would say, yeah, you guys will get out in your job, and you're going to realize that all these grand visions and ideas you have are not just going to snap. Because you have to deal with people in your work. And so I think there's a message, there's something I've learned, right? So as you lead change, as you lead cultural change, what are, as you've done it, have you seen changes been implemented over the course of several decades? What are some keys for a leader that what do they need to have to help persevere and work through and make those big changes?
Wow. Lots of things. So when you look at VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. Is that right?
I believe so.
So with volatile, you need vision, you need understanding, you need clarity, and then you need, I can't think it's action. So there is an antidote to these things. It's really strange you talked about culture. I remember as a young leader thinking all this talk about culture was a complete waste of time. It's like I'm not interested. I'm just going to do it. And it's only as I've got older I've realized how foolish that was. So I was a believer that culture didn't exist. If I can't see it, I can't touch it, I can't smell it, it's not real. Whereas now I realize, wow, culture is very pervasive. So ultimately, I can, whatever my position, whether it's within the structure or without the structure, I can affect culture change, but it will only be around me. And so it is a long conversation, but I'm not a victim. I'm going to make a change, and so you have to commit yourself to change and pay whatever costs that may come and go. I have just been fortunate when I think of the big culture changes that I've been involved in. I intuitively followed the right people, and so they opened doors for me. So with leading the coaching culture. I'm a good friend with Joe Schlee when he was the NCD in France. So we talked to him. He's like, yeah, let's do some coaching with the campus team in Paris. But Francis Didier was interested. And so he said, well, would you have it in Rennes? So we had it in Rennes. And so we had the national director involved, and he thought it was good. So it then became all of France. So there was a relational network that I intuitively followed that actually changed cultures much faster than the hierarchy. So a edict or a PowerPoint does not change things. So you can change a culture on a team really quickly. You just do identify the values you want and then support one another in, are we doing that? Are we keeping that? But keeping it really simple. What do you do? Let's do think time. So you're both on teams. You could, a way to keep that happen would be, every week you'd say, have you had the hour think time this week or whatever it is? So if you start asking those questions all the time, you'll get fed up of saying no. So you'll start doing it. So it's not difficult to start. It just feels overwhelming.
So, but I feel like in a lot of times where I've seen change happen is where it starts more organically, like kind of what you
Yes,
explained with
totally.
Joe. And because top down, yeah, whatever. But if you start showing that this is a win and other people buy in, and it just that takes a lot longer in a will to persevere through, even sometimes maybe other people in other parts saying that's stupid, we shouldn't do that, or even top leadership saying we shouldn't do that.
We're an old organization comparatively, so we have a lot to lose. So therefore we tend to be more conservative. When we started, we had nothing to lose. We were really radical, and so we have to get back to that without losing the wisdom. As it was, Eleanor Roosevelt said, learn from the mistakes of others. You're not going to live long enough to make them all yourself. So we do need to, not forget history, but to learn from history. But we have to capture that. Let's take some risks for Jesus and not worry too much about our reputation.
Mm-hmm.
All right, you've got a question. I can tell. I could tell that.
I've got all sorts of questions. Some of them pertain to this. Are there specific areas that you feel like let's broaden it out past organizationally. So let's maybe broaden it out towards missions in general, or the church in general. Are there areas that you think we really, because of the way the world's changed, but also maybe straying from, let's say, key gospel message or whatever else? I'm just trying to make a broad enough category here that we can talk about it. Are there areas where you think someone needs to begin leading change in these areas? So things that we're married to that we shouldn't be married to, entrenched too much.
Wow. Well, the danger is we're attached to promoting ourselves, whatever. So I would say no, that actually there's loads of amazing stuff happening in the fast changing world. It's just we're not aware of it because they aren't telling us the story, or it doesn't fit our model. So I think there's a phrase, it's amazing what you can do as long as you don't care who gets the fame.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say most places there are amazing things going on under the surface. So it is, it's the challenge of the larger organizations who a bit more complex, a bit slower to adapt. And so you get to, if you're comfortable, you won't change. So if you're comfortable with the results that you're seeing, well, why would you change? Why would you go through that period of uncertainty where results will get even worse when you have no guarantee of what the future will be, whether or not that will be better? And it's that period of uncertainty in like the Bridges model. That's when you learn the most. That's when you grow the most. That's the most uncomfortable. That's when the doubt is the greatest. That's when the identity and the security of the leaders is revealed for what it is. It's helping people deal with that discomfort to help us get to the promised land.
Mm-hmm. Oftentimes, this is speaking of companies, so not so much ministries, but I kind of wonder about the wisdom of it. Larger companies they will spawn a smaller company who is set on trying to break new ground. So Volvo and Polestar. You can see the bones of a Volvo car in Polestar, but they're not the same company, but there's sharing of technology, which has actually helped Volvo move forward into electric car stuff. Sometimes I wonder organizationally, because so much of the uncertainty and the risk that's involved with trying stupid new things within large organizations makes us resistant to that. But why are we so reluctant to allow smaller endeavors to spin off and do things in the interest of finding new ways forward? Because it seems like we want to own everything oftentimes. We want to get the credit. Maybe that's it. We want to get the credit. We want to get the fame. I don't know what it is, but it seems to me we're very afraid of letting a new endeavor just go to see what happens, to do some crazy, but without the restrictions of larger organizational concerns.
It's kind of interesting in the 19th century with the Industrial Revolution, people were just, it seemed like the culture was people were trying stuff. And wouldn't it be great if the greater mission story was sharing what we're trying? So what would be helpful would be, partnership. God commands a blessing where brothers dwell in harmony. And so, having a space where mission practitioners can learn from, we're doing this, we're doing that. Here, you take my stuff. So we have been good at giving away our stuff. I think that's been a great legacy of our organization. I just think we also should be humble enough to say, wow, that's really good. Can we use it? So we need to be a bit more eclectic, and it doesn't have to have the perfect DNA that we want everything to have.
But that's hard for the larger you get, isn't it? To accept that it doesn't really have our DNA, but man, it's really great. At the same time, I see us using things that are, hey, I know a lot of staff who are using Bible project materials, and because it's just really great, and there's no problem with that. So,
but I think too, to comment on that, I think the issue in Europe, or at least maybe the ground we've run into in Europe particularly has been so hard. We've realized a lot of our inherited wisdom, and I'm speaking this more as an American because I realize there's this kind of cuts out the European experience by itself, but dealing with a secular culture, I think for a lot of us, we've come here and gone, what the roadmap I was given doesn't work here, and so I have to. So I think we've seen, and this is ongoing conversation as well, but you've seen two reactions to that, which is one is it doesn't work, so I'm just going to keep grinding at that roadmap until it does work, and I'm messing up metaphors here, or I just go home exhausted and tired. I haven't been able to put meaning around it. But I think one thing that we've had to go and look is like what we've been told to do isn't working the way we want it to work. I have to go find somebody or something. So I think Europe has been, and I say to highlight this as Europe as maybe a star, an unappreciated star in this thinking, is that we have, because of the toughness of where we're working, we have had the ability to been forced to, in a lot of ways, start to look to those things and maybe be a leader in some of that. Maybe that's unfair to say.
Yeah, but I think it's really interesting. So it's not that I'm not saying Europe is not hard. I just think it's contextual. So what was harder?
Exactly. Yes.
Doing mission during the Black Death or during the Spanish Inquisition? But what's really interesting is you talked about where is God working, and then Chip and Dan Heath's book Switch, he talks about bright spots. So God is always at work. God is at work in Spain. God is at work in France.
Yeah.
Do we as an organization or missions know where that is? And are we going to them saying, wow, it's amazing what you're doing. How is that happening? So this goes back to leaders being learners. We want to be hungry, but we need to know our audience. We need to know I believe God is at work everywhere. I don't believe there's any situation that is beyond God's reach. And he works in spite of us sometimes. But we want to be curious enough to say, well, okay, I'm really struggling. I'm working really hard. So I don't want to say people are not working hard. People are working really, really, really hard.
Yep.
But the map you've been given maybe is the wrong map. Or the map. It was a great map 150 years ago.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So it's not to say. So I would say, I think in certain circles, they go, well, why do you not have the numbers of Brazil, right? For instance, and I would say, first of all, your numbers in Brazil, are you sure they're what you're counting? Are you sure that? And then second of all, well, we've got other numbers that are maybe that don't look that way, but are show that God is working and that things are progressing and that the value of the work is correct. So there's some issue there too of how you contextualize what's going on here.
Yeah, but you have to reject that. You say, well, that is amazing. Brazilians, come over and help us. It's people are working really hard. I think we need to be very clear. It's not people. It's not that. And God, an interesting question I ask people in different countries is, has there ever been a religious revival in your country? And I suppose, foolishly, I believed that was true everywhere. But apparently it's not. There are some countries, maybe they've had a localized revival, but something that swept the whole country, like Wesley and Whitfield, and then, the Outer Hebrides revival, Knox. There were amazing outpourings of God. I just imagine that had happened everywhere in every country in the world.
Yeah.
That foolishly was a foolish assumption. That isn't true.
Well, we probably need to start wrapping up here.
Yeah, we do. Wow, time's gone fast.
This has been a great conversation.
We might have to have you back on again. My appetite is whetted.
Yeah, this has been a great conversation. I do think we would be remiss in not talking briefly about whiskey and Scottish, because this is something near and dear to your heart.
Yes.
What are you drinking right now, and why do you love? What is special about Scottish whiskey?
What is special about Scottish whiskey? So I only drink it with people. So for me, it's that opportunity to share something really nice and slow down. So I'm a big Lefroy fan. I was given this for my Secret Santa.
Well, that's a great Secret Santa gift. Wow,
a little small one, and a hip flask to go with it too. That was very kind. The bottle is still full, so I think. What do I love about it? Yeah, despite what happens in the movies, you have to sit down and drink it slowly. And I like the fact it slows you down, and you have a proper glass, and you sometimes talk rubbish. And it's so different. There are Scottish whiskies that destroy the back of your throat. There's so much alcohol, and then there are ones that are just amazing. So I like trying. I've not found my perfect whiskey yet. I look forward to the gift that you guys bring me, so that maybe that will be it. Or glug. Yeah, I'm very happy to have some glug.
Unfortunately, I'm no longer in the land of it, but I can make it for you. Why don't you come to Spain and I'll make some for you?
Okay.
I love that whiskey is a lot like wine, but I think more pointed. But there's a story behind every bottle, and there's something there. All the taste and flavor and smell you get, and then
I should tell
where
you
it came from.
I should tell you something, that I obviously used to be against Irish whiskey.
I know that
because it wasn't Scottish. But at the recent tour done Jameson's, we discovered that Mr. Jameson is Scottish.
There you go. Yeah.
Basically, Jameson's is a Scottish whiskey, so now I can drink it. You can drink Jameson's. Enjoy it. Yeah.
Another interesting thing about Jameson's is one of the heirs to the original Jameson. He was on the the trip with Stanley to go find Livingston,
Wow.
He went crazy, became a cannibal, and Stanley had to kill him because he started killing natives, and he went nuts. So there's maybe another. That's not the best way to end this podcast.
No.
Yeah. Wow. Considering, wow. Well, Paul, on that note, I'm sure there's a leadership lesson in there somewhere. Listen, I think we should have you back, because I think one of the things I'd love to talk about with you is burnout of leaders. You've seen a lot. I think you probably have some wisdom in that regard. And so next time, let's put that up on the whiteboard, and we'll have you back.
Sounds like a great idea.
Thank you for your wisdom. Thank you for all that you do, and we'll see you at the next thing we see you at.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Paul.
See you later.